Good day, grade 10s. This is your teacher here, and what we're going to do, we are going to start with topic 2, European expansion and conquest. What I would like you to do is I would like you to write down these notes in your book as we go along. So the first thing we're going to cover today will be the glossary. I think that's all we're probably going to have time to do because this free recorder only records about 15 minutes per session. So let's go through this as quickly as possible. The Atlantic slave trade, you will remember that from grade 8. It was basically a period of time where European powers would go and collect slaves from Africa and then drop them off in the Americas so that they could produce raw materials which would then be sold back to the European powers, who would then make manufactured goods which they then sold for profit. So that was the transatlantic slave trade. Main thing you need to know is that African people were caught and sold as slaves in the Americas. Then we have colonial conquest, colonial powers that invaded colonies and then took political, social, and economic control. So let's first break down what are colonial powers. It's basically European nations that have a lot of, let's call it flout. They've got a lot of clout. And they would go to other countries and take over, just completely just take it over, and then start to use the resources of that country. They became known as colonial powers, which is the next thing underneath. So colonial powers, as I've explained, European countries that asserted themselves as major colonial forces. So they actually built themselves up to take over other countries, basically. Then we've got colonialism. This is a very important word to know. So once you're done writing it down, I want you to highlight it. Colonialism is basically a system of expansion whereby countries are invaded and then conquered by colonial powers. So in other words, these big strong European countries like Britain and Spain and Portugal would go to countries that can't necessarily fight back. They would go to North America, South America, Africa, India, and they would then invade these countries, and because of their superior technology they were able to then also conquer and take over these countries. And that process where one country takes over another country is called colonialism. Colonies, once a country has been taken over, it becomes known as a colony. So colonies are countries that were colonized by the colonial powers and expected to be subservient unto them. Now, subservient is a big word. You'll see there's kind of the word servant in there, right? You see subservient, it kind of sounds like servant. So subservient basically just means that these people had to listen to what the colonial powers said. They had no power over their own political, economic, and social situation. They had to follow whatever the colonial powers decided. So if the colonial powers decided your country was Christian, then too bad for you, your country is going to be Christian. Then you have the conquistadors, which are basically just Spanish soldiers. That's going to be very important for when we get to that section of the work, but it is soldiers who conquered the Inca and the Aztec empires. We are going to focus on the Aztec Empire, not so much on the Inca Empire. Then we've got the economy. So the reason I included this word in the glossary is because it's going to come up a lot in history. You're going to see it come up again and again. So it's important that you know what it means because it's going to come up in grade 11 and it's going to come up in grade 12. So if you know what it means in grade 10, then you already got a bit of a head start. So an economy is basically a system of making and trading things of value, meaning you can trade goods or services for money. So your economy has got to do with how does your country deal with money. So later on in this unit, I'm going to speak about the economic causes of colonial expansion. So that means what monetary reason? Why were people traveling? Because they wanted money. Next, we have empire. An empire is basically a group of nations or peoples ruled over by an emperor, empress, or powerful sovereign or government. So basically, it's similar to a colonial power. So if you think of one of the great empires that you would maybe be familiar with, would be the British Empire. So Britain would be the colonial power. They then went and took over India and South Africa, to name a few. There was also Australia, New Zealand. At one point, they owned like half the world. So that whole unit, where Britain is at the top and they took over Australia, New Zealand, South Africa, India, that is called an empire. A nation that is controlled by a king or queen or an empress or emperor, it becomes known as an empire. Encomienda, which will come a little bit later in the unit, is basically a system whereby Spanish settlers could collect tribute from local people. Now, you will remember I did explain what a tribute was in the previous unit that we did. It's basically when you go to a group of people, let's say, and you demand that they give you money in return for something or other. So in this case, the local people that were conquered by the Spanish had to give money over to the Spanish. Then you've got the word genocide. Now, genocide in this unit, it's kind of contested whether it was genocide or not, but it is important to know for grade 11, when we will be doing the Nazis and we will be doing eugenics and things like that. But for now, you need to know that genocide is the mass extermination of human beings, especially of a race or a nation. So usually when they ask questions on that, they'll ask you to discuss whether you think this was genocide or not. Basically, genocide, everybody gets killed because of their belief or because of their race. They are targeted and they are killed. So that is genocide. Then we've got the word heathen. That's going to come up a lot in this unit. A heathen is basically a non-believer. Somebody that did not believe in God would be referred to as a heathen. There's a popular song made by the band 21 Pilots where they actually speak about heathens. Then you've got independence. So that means the right of people to govern themselves. Indigenous, this is a very important word. Please highlight it when you write it down. Indigenous means native or original inhabitants. That's going to come up a lot. If you see the word native, if you see the word original inhabitants, then you know that person is an indigenous person. They are born in that place. They didn't come from anywhere else, and therefore they are indigenous. Then once again, the word political is a historical term that you need to know. It's going to come in grade 11 and it's going to come in grade 12. So political means the way that people living in groups make decisions. So for example, it's got to do with government. How do people agree to run the country? That would be your political causes. Then you've got the word social. It has to do with people living or gathering in groups. How did European expansion have a social impact? How did it have an impact on the people that were living in the area? So economic, political, and social, very important to know. Economic had to do with money. Political's got to do with government. Social's got to do with people. And then the last word I want to do is the word tribute. It means that colonized people had to pay tax in the form of produce or labor. Okay, so those are the important terms of this unit. The next time I make a video, I will be discussing the reasons for European expansion. But your homework for this session is going to be to write down your glossary in your book. Remember, I want you guys to make a term 2 divider. And then your heading of this unit is topic 2. Let's go back to the top there. Topic 2, European expansion and conquest. and then I want you guys to please write down the glossary. So if you can just pause it at a certain place and just write it down, that would work out fabulously. There's not too much to write, thankfully. So it should take you about plus minus about half an hour. But the good news is when you come back to school, you are going to be ahead. And the next time I see you, we'll do reasons for European expansion. Okay, bye!